the end, I say, okay, we'll do a goodbye, and I'll say bye-bye, and sometimes people go bye back, and sometimes they just sit in silence. It's up to you how awkward you want me to feel at that point. So
we can sit in silence the whole time if you want. We're good at that.
If that works, I mean, I think for an audio podcast that might not work, but we'll see.
Oh, we breathe really heavy though.
Yeah, that'd be
raspy and wheezing.
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. Okay, let's get started so that we don't run out of time for you. Hello and welcome to Future Library. Yes, again, I've forgotten what episode number this is. They're all out of order, the recent ones, listeners. That's just how it's going to be. Get used to it. I'm going to cut straight to the chase today because time is slightly of the essence. I'm joined by two members of a band that has been, how can I describe them? They've been kind of there for my entire adult life. Something that I've kind of cherished and looked forward to their releases and found myself humming their songs at odd times. I'm blown away to be speaking to them. I'm joined by Dave and Kristin from Throwing Muses. How are you doing?
Hey.
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm sitting here on a cold November night in the UK.
So are we in the new UK.
Yeah,
it's
the
just
new
too
UK.
cold. What happened? God's wrong.
It was so...
It's supposed to be fall. It's freezing.
It's freezing.
And we had a bit of a warm summer, and suddenly it just went freezing cold.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, I don't like God anymore. I was in good with him for a while, seasonally speaking, but no more.
You see, the other podcast I do is I'm a raging atheist. So
A raging one.
Raging atheist. Well, that's what the people that come on and could have talked to me about religion, who are religious, think of me. Whereas actually, I'm quite a nice atheist, really. But
Oh, what a horrible way to spend an hour.
well, it can be quite fraught. Let's put it that way. But this is
What
a
does
nice
future library mean? You skip a syllable when you say that word.
one. Future library. Is it in library that I skip it?
Well, have you ever read the word?
Yeah.
There are 3 syllables in it.
Yeah, but I'm British, so we say library.
But then you add another one in aluminium, don't you?
We just spell it different altogether.
You do?
Yeah, aluminum and aluminium are spelled differently, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, you should spell library different too then.
I should pronounce it differently, but I'm used to it now. You know, I've been pronouncing it this way for, well, I was going to say 40 years, but I don't think I was talking for the first 3 or 4 of those. So probably
I'm
30.
just saying it that way now. I like it better.
Yeah, library. Well, a future library is the idea.
It saves time.
I'm sorry?
It saves time.
Yeah, but there you go. It does. It cuts that fraction of a second out, and it speeds the whole thing
I'm
on.
going to get so much more done because I just say aluminum.
There
now
you
I'm
go.
going to say library.
Yeah, you see double saving.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, a future library is, well, the idea is that eventually it will be kind of a library that people can look back on.
Oh.
You see. There we go. That's another. Every week there's a little kind of drop of what's going on from the podcasting world for the listeners, and there's this week's little truth nugget dropped on you. Yeah, the idea is eventually it'll kind of form a kind of reference that people can go back to. So that was why I call it Future Library. So,
Nice.
Which actually leads me quite neatly into a question I had for you guys. Because earlier on Facebook, I was asking any of my friends if they had any questions for yourselves. One of them said, and this is kind of a fairly throwaway question, and no pun is intended given what the question is. He says, have you ever tried to throw a muse? And if you have, how far did you throw it? And what was the damage?
We were thrown by muses. The muses were doing the throwing, so yeah, you can throw that question right out.
See, so they were the ones, so they were throwing muses.
The
So
muses
that were
us around, yeah.
I see, it makes sense. There you go. That's the answer for
Thrown
Les.
by.
You're thrown by the muses.
Yeah.
Wasn't as great as Throwing
as our
Muses.
great name that has never caused us any trouble because it has too many syllables.
I'm sure if you said it really quick, you could get rid of some of that. Throw muses. Thrown.
Yeah,
There you go.
say it like you would.
Thrown. There you go. I got rid of some.
It's
It
weird
does sound
because
like
then the word throwing becomes, you think someone's saying your name, or when you see it written, it becomes like
Like chrysanthemum. Like you can call chrysanthemum a mum, or you can call them a chrysanth.
Yeah.
But apparently, nobody calls them chrysanthemums. I can't even say chrysanth. That seems harder.
Chrysanth seems harder. You have to end with it.
And mum seems weird. I call them.
And mom means a bunch of different stuff. Like it means quiet, it means mother, so that's useless.
Doesn't get you anywhere, does it?
No.
Man, that's something that I think I'm going to have to dwell on that later on. I think the whole concept of chrysanthemum. But yeah, band names though, they don't really. Once you've picked it and you're stuck with it, it doesn't really end up meaning anything, does it? It just becomes, unless it's something awful like Ned's Atomic Dustbin.
Lawyers told me when I was naming 50-foot wave that I should make up a word because everything else is illegal.
Everything else is illegal?
Yeah, everything else is copyrighted by somebody or potentially copyrighted by somebody. And 50-foot wave is the longest sound wave, the lowest sound wave audible to human ears. And it was also a painting. And so I could be sued by, sound waves and painters, I suppose.
Do you think sound waves have got good lawyers?
Everybody does, apparently, according to my lawyers. They're scared of all the other lawyers.
Maybe they're kind of working for the sound waves.
Oh, I didn't think about that. You're a conspiracy theorist, aren't you? And an idiot. Raging one.
Yeah, a raging atheist and a conspiracy. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I have a theory that conspiracy theorists are usually wrong. Because, I've worked for the civil service, so these people who kind of talk about September 11th being an inside job, I've worked in that kind of environment. No, it's not. As soon as you put civil servants in the whole mix, it's not going to happen. Anyway, let's talk about something that hasn't happened for almost a decade. There's a new Throwing Muses record.
Yeah.
What happened? How did that happen?
Well, it's funny. We were just talking to somebody about, or I think it was the Mercury guy I was talking to, because we're always doing, she's always working. She's writing or she plays in a million bands and I can't keep up with it. And then the Muses do something every 1 or 2 years. And at the end of the process of designing the book, they said to us, we need you to design a sticker to put on it. And they gave me the copy to put on it. And in the copy, it said, first record in 10 years. And I kind of did huh? And I thought, that's kind of a stupid thing to say. Because we've been doing stuff and we've been playing. That just seems weird that they would just go. And it has been the lead on every single thing that's been written about the record. First record in 10 years. So it's funny. It's harder for us to have that perspective because.
Well, we did keep working. We don't think music has anything to do with the music business. We've done tours, released an anthology, we were writing songs and been recording for half that time, for 5 years. So it doesn't feel like we haven't been working.
It makes sense in that we don't, we're not part of any kind of, like, in the old days when it was much more of a traditional record, tour. So we don't fit into that model anymore, but it's weird. To me, it just doesn't feel like it's been 10 years since we recorded. But I guess technically it has. Mm-hmm. It's funny.
But 10 years.
Anyway.
There's music and then there's music out loud and, I'm not sure it really matters except we became listener supported in the meantime. And so this music that we're playing is out loud because we can release it without a middleman. We circumvent the traditional recording industry, and that's how you have to do it if you don't want to dumb down your product and play the game, blah, blah, blah.
And, and Kristin, she's writing all the time. She gets up earlier than me, and I think I get up early. But she's always writing. So, to answer your question, she came into town and said, I got a bunch of songs and I don't think they're Kristin songs and I don't think they're 50-foot wave songs and I don't think they're the band's outro songs. I think they're Muses songs. So I went by the studio where she was demoing them and she told me she had like 50 or I don't know how many you had.
I started with 75, but I only recorded 50.
And then we kind of went from there. So and then.
Well, when you heard it, you said, my mind is fractured too. And I thought, screw you, Dave. But what he meant was, it is the time for fractured pieces.
Because the first stuff I heard was what, I mean, I think what defines this record. It was one of those pieces where it was like a 45-second, under a minute. And those were the first pieces that I heard. So, that's not really answering your question, but just to it's just that she had this group of songs that she decided were Throwing Muses songs. She's wrong about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Not she's never wrong on the Throwing Muses side, but she's wrong on the solo side sometimes.
Yeah, every now and then Dave will say, "That's mine."
Song, and I'll be like, "No, that's really not Kristin Hersh song."
You can tell,
but I don't get up early enough, so it's usually done by the time I'm up.
So I guess from your point, as you're saying, I mean, you've been working pretty much solidly doing other things for that whole time that you've supposedly been away. 10 years isn't actually that long at all when you kind of think, I think back what was I doing 10 years ago? I could have I'm at that point now where I start to think of the 90s being only 10 years ago. So,
but you're right. 10 years it doesn't feel that long to me either.
Yeah,
I still think it is the 90s.
Well, it does. I kind of still think of the 90s as being kind of really recent, and I then see photographs from the 90s and they go, "Oh, look at the fashions from the 90s," and I go, "I remember it being all right." And then I look at photos, I was like,
"Fashions in the 90s?"
Apparently so. Not that I ever saw, but I think maybe checked shirts were in for a short while, the whole Nirvana thing, but they never have gone away. I mean, if you go to Canada, they're still in. It's just like Canadians.
They're still in everywhere. If your little subculture never becomes popular culture, it just sort of sticks around.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, I'm sitting here wearing a pair of jeans, a pair of Converse, and an old Eric's Trip T-shirt. And if you'd have seen a photograph of me 10 years ago, I'd have been wearing exactly the same. 20 years ago, exactly the same.
Yeah, and so would other people.
Yeah.
We're looking at a photograph of you with something on your head. I don't know.
It's an Angry Bird, right?
It's an Angry Bird's hat.
Okay.
Yeah. I should explain that me and my wife have recently got into, every time we go to the food shopping, at the store we go to, they have animal hats, and we start to get into the habit of buying an animal hat every time we're there.
Wow.
I've got a panda hat, I've got a giraffe hat, I've got the Angry Birds hat that you can see there. I think it's dignified for a man of 40.
Wow,
Can you pull it down over so that your eyes so that the Angry Bird's eyes are over? But you wouldn't be able to see, right? They don't have like eye holes or anything, do they?
Sadly
Don't
not.
say eye hole on a podcast.
Yeah, sadly, that doesn't happen with that particular.
That would be awesome.
I do have a full head Homer Simpson thing. I could put holes in it, yeah. Yeah, I have a full face Homer Simpson mask that I used to use for performances, and you can't see out either eye because they're too far apart. So you're looking.
What kind of performance do you wear a Homer Simpson mask for?
I was doing a Gameboy chip music techno thing called DJ Wrong Homer.
Well, I'm totally lost already.
It was me with my Game Boy playing electronic music from my Game Boy and dancing around with a Homer Simpson mask on.
Wow.
It was hellish.
A Game Boy.
Game Boy.
What is Game Boy? I think that's a British.
No, it's a little Nintendo Game Boy. Like a little.
Like Game Boys?
Yeah, like a Game Boy, like a Nintendo Game Boy. Yeah.
Is that what they call them here?
Thought so.
Okay.
They're called DSs now here.
It's a 90s thing.
Yeah, it's an 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So the new record, it's got kind of, as you say, it's kind of quite fractured and from my understanding, quite a lot of short tracks. Is that because that is how long the tracks felt they should be?
Well, really, they come in and out of each other. A bridge will reappear as an instrumental, will reappear as a backing vocal or a bass line. They work in and out of each other. Sometimes we'll put 2 or 3 versions of one song on the record in different guises. And so it's that kind of shattered, not necessarily short pieces, but when they needed to, and this time we edited them. Normally a record company would ask you to write 12 3-minute songs. Instead, we wrote 32-second songs.
And a book, I believe, as well.
We wrote a book too. Yeah, that was weird. My last solo record I released as a book, and I liked the idea that we could divorce music from the little piece of plastic no one values anymore and make it a piece, make it as beautiful as it needs to be if you want to hand it to somebody. Mm-hmm. We think music should be a gift, and that way you stay unattached. And I don't think you should discuss music the way you can't discuss politics. You don't even want to force feed somebody your soundtrack. It turns them off. But if you hand them a nice book, then it's a gift, and you just walk away, which is kind of what we're doing professionally. You have to, you worship it, you obsess on it. It's your baby, it's your dream, it's everything, and then you have to just plop it down and walk away.
Yeah. Sorry. I think it's interesting what you're saying about the whole not valuing the disc anymore. It's something that we've touched on this podcast quite a lot over the last couple of years. And I know you've kind of taken the reins back with the whole cash music thing. So with that, was that kind of a conscious thing that once you're out of the record deal that you thought, right, the situation is now such that we can take control of these things?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
We were trying to put music back in the hands of the musicians, but also into the hands of the listeners. I don't have a lot of problem with music being available in the ether, even though it makes a lot of us musicians poor, because the potential for a musical education, it makes for more musically literate listeners, and that can only be a good thing. In fact, 50 Foot Wave has always given its music away. And you try to do vinyl. You just try to break as many rules as you possibly can to divorce music from the rock star and the almighty dollar sign. The business was a big, fat, ugly giant, and everybody knew it, but it finally fell down. And that can only be a good thing. Revolutions are painful, but ultimately it's going to be a good thing.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think it was quite interesting that the person I've heard most eloquently explain it was, of all people, Mick Jagger, saying about this whole concept of people becoming super famous and very, very wealthy from music was this weird blip in the history of music that isn't actually based on any of the past and doesn't seem to be what the future holds.
Yeah. I think when the Carter family started driving around collecting folk songs that weren't written by one person, they were written by many, many people, playing them for each other, traveling over the ocean and playing them throughout the mountains. They started collecting these songs and writing their names on them and demanding payment when they were played. I think that's when it all started to go downhill. Yeah. Music used to be a spontaneous human venture, and in fact it always was, it always will be. It's just distorted by marketing.
And now the marketing is really kind of back in the hands of the musicians. And
hopefully we can change the definition of marketing.
Yeah.
Away from demographics and into, musical literacy, really. You need to know how to be moved by music. It has to resonate, and you have to respond. A listener is doing most of the work in that case. A musician will always play music, but a listener's job is a tough one.
I think especially these days as well, because there is so much music, I think it's very easy to kind of get overwhelmed with it. And I think the days of people maybe sitting and living with an album for a few weeks and just listening to nothing but that album seem to have gone, which I think is a real shame, because I remember back in the day, when I didn't have a lot of disposable income, I'd go and buy one record and then it'd be like 2 months before I could buy another one. So I'd get to know that one record very, very well. Nowadays, I think people are more likely to listen to something a couple of times, then put it on their iPod, and then it will occasionally pop up being shuffled as they sit at work. I don't know how I feel about that.
It is hard to just figure that out. You got me, because there is, part of what Kristin's saying about, learning to listen, and, that there is, for lack of a better word, I mean, just as you described, being almost forced to listen to that one thing. But the whole idea of it not being immediate is kind of gone. There were some things, some of my favorite records, I put them on when I was younger and thought, I know I can get in a really general sense that there's something really attractive to me here. There's something great going on, but I'm not quite sure. And so it actually did involve some commitment on my part. I had to keep listening until I broke through that.
But if you think about it, we were different listeners from most people. Most of those records that everyone was listening to and devoting time to were chosen to be sold by a marketing team. Now we have the ability to seek out what moves us the most, and we do spend time with that music. It's back in our hands.
Absolutely. Do you think with things like iTunes that the whole concept for the album for a generation of listeners is gone?
That's an interesting one, because I feel we've talked about this in some of the other interviews for this, and it's funny because we've never really had the conversation. I'm not even sure how Kristin feels about this, but this album for me is such an album. I think almost more than anything we've done, it really is an album, and yet at the same time, it feels to me the point where I am ready to let go of albums. I don't think it has to be that we have to think in those terms anymore. And I think we can record and then maybe after the fact decide, oh, this kind of all works as a collection. We'll package it up and then make it something tangible that people could have. But the album, to me, I think for many years it was a forced concept, come up with 12 songs, and then there was this idea that it was an album, and there were a lot of times that it was just I think for a lot of bands they were just putting 12 songs together. There wasn't a whole lot of thought behind it. So I mean, I don't know. I just because I was very reluctant when we sort of moved into the virtual music to lose that. But a lot of it was the packaging, to go back to what Kristin was saying about the book. I mean, a lot of it was that idea that you couldn't engage with it in a tactile way. But in terms of the, making albums, that's kind of for me, the interesting thing about this record is it is the most album.
Yeah, but this is exactly what it should be, too.
Yeah.
This is the first project we've ever done that we're completely happy with, because now, with that record company involvement, not only can we take 5 years to make a record, we can release 5 records a year if we want. And this piece needed to be a book, and it needed to have visual elements, and it needed to be 32 shattered songs. It just needed to be exactly what it was, and we would not have had the wherewithal or the time in the old days to pull this together.
Well, I mean, I think the thing as well with the book is, again, it's something that we've talked about on the podcast before. It's the idea that these days you have to kind of give people something that can't be easily downloaded if you want them to buy a physical thing. Because so many people will just go, I'll just go on this music blog and download this ripped version of it from Pitchfork's website or something, and they won't buy the record. But I think it's important to give people something that's a nice object that they want, regardless of whether there's a piece of plastic in it or not. To me it's almost reaching the point where you could quite easily do a book or something that was artistic that couldn't be downloaded and just put a download code in it or something like that.
That's what I did on my last solo record.
Yeah.
But I've found that our listeners will buy a fistful of whatever.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, the book is something that is going to be attractive to people who know us,
right?
So it's
anonymity is really the enemy in this world. It isn't poverty,
Yeah.
The music is supposed to be heard, so I don't care how they get it, and if they don't own the book, it's sort of their loss. But some people don't have enough money for a book.
So do you take a fairly kind of pragmatic attitude towards illegal downloads, effectively, that it's going to happen and you just have to live with it, would you say?
Oh, yeah, we encourage it. In fact, on 50 Foot Wave Records, they all say share this music any way you can.
I think that's a really positive way to look at it because I found certainly, I mean, I'm terrible for downloading tons and tons of music. I do buy a lot still, but I tend to buy it from people I know personally these days. And I think what I found is that I'm finding things that I wouldn't have otherwise listened to because I kind of think, oh, that looks interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Then
I like
go and buy
what it does
stuff.
to kids, how they listen beyond genre and era even.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible for a young person to be moved by music regardless of style.
Yeah. Well, a good example of that is my youngest son, who is 15 at the moment. He's decided that Who's Goo are one of the best bands he'd ever heard, just because I sent him some MP3s that I'd got of them, that I ripped from my
My
CDs.
10-year-old is really into the Violent Femmes.
See, that's fantastic. And they don't sort of go, oh, that's old music, or this is new music. You know,
Well, real music shouldn't be stuck in time. And that really should, that's obvious. You know, production can sometimes get in the way of that, but any real song is not going to stick itself in linear time. And kids with an ear know that. Human beings.
And even if
know that.
even if they just simply know that a lot of what's being fed to them is crap, and that I think is what makes it so that they don't look at something like Who's Goo and go, that's old, because they have no, on the other side of it, they know that a lot of what's new is crap.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. I think as well, you touched on the production side of it there. I think since production has become kind of less gimmicky with a lot of music, I think it's still kind of quite gimmicky with chart music, but I think with a lot of bands, I've got fairly transparent production on their records, I'd say, and it's harder to date a record by its production than it was. I mean, I'll listen to a Radiohead album from over 10 years ago, and it sounds to me as current as anything being released today. Or I'll listen to the Richard D. James album by Aphex Twin, and it doesn't sound older than my 17-year-old son. You know,
it's not supposed to. That's fashion.
Yeah,
You shouldn't engage in fashion if you're engaging in music.
Absolutely. So you end up with music that is far more timeless, I think. I mean, I always kind of think of the two records for me that kind of illustrate that are Sgt. Pepper and was it Bookends by Simon & Garfunkel? Both released in the same year. And I think Sgt. Pepper, to me, has dated far more than the Simon & Garfunkel record has, because there was a lot of kind of production tricks on the Sgt. Pepper, but on the Simon & Garfunkel record,
songs.
Yeah.
No, but I've always, I always wished you could hear what those songs would have sounded like just being played by a band, because they're, the production on that stuff. I don't know. It just got too over the top.
Mm-hmm. I have another question from a reader of my Facebook wall. Exciting stuff. Sean Blizzard wants to know, who was Mr. Huberty?
He shot up a McDonald's in America in the 80s, killed a lot of people.
There you go. A less positive answer than Sean was probably hoping for. But that's
sorry, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, Sean, but there's your answer. So you've got this record coming out. Well, I've lost track a little bit here because of I've been in this kind of weird house buying mental space recently, so I've kind of lost track of a lot of things. Is the record out or is it coming out?
It's out where you live, I think.
Right.
It's out on your street.
Yes.
It's out on my street. That's shameful.
Releasing it by neighborhoods. I think it's not out here yet.
Right. It's out on December 3rd.
Okay.
Here in America.
And is that going to be mail order only, or are they going to be going into... That sounds old-fashioned, doesn't it? Mail order only. Is it going to be an online purchasing thing, or people are going to be able to walk into stores and get it?
Oh, it's published by HarperCollins, so
right.
It's in bookstores and music stores.
That'll explain why it was somebody from HarperCollins who was writing to me for the last 2 months.
Yeah.
I was wondering about
We don't even know what to call it. We just say, release, because you can't call it a record. And sometimes they call it a record, but that's not they don't really know that word. And
Yeah.
and then there's pub date versus record release, right? And so you say the release is released, and that's silly.
It's an artifact, maybe.
We hope.
Yeah, it goes into the future library.
Yes.
There you go. Obviously, Kristin, you wrote Rat Girl, which I think is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I did ask you on Twitter a while ago if there was going to be a follow-up, and you gave an answer that was kind of vague, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was along the lines of, well, I'm writing 2 books, so maybe nothing.
Oh yeah, well, I'm writing 3 books, and I was hoping that 2 of them would suck so that I could finish the 3rd one, but they all kind of suck about the same. So,
you see, I'm kind of hoping there's a follow-up because I really like. I read a lot of band biographies, and I like the bits when the bands are starting. That's to me is the interesting part. So that's one of the things I really liked about Rat Girl was it seemed to be kind of a really nice snapshot of a band right at the start of its career. And I think once you get into the bit where it's all kind of known history, to me it gets less interesting. So I still think from what you were writing, it's still at that point where there's all the interesting stuff to come. And that's not to say there's not other interesting stuff to come later on, but from my perspective, if you see what I mean. So
yes, yeah, that's why I chose that year. It's because everything, all the themes in the book began then. And there are more themes than music, obviously, but it was the beginning of most of them. And I like that, because it's sort of under the auspices of a psychology. You realize that even in a real life, there's foreshadowing, there are morals. And, it doesn't have to, you don't have to call it an exciting time. It's just that it's new. And that's, an innocent way to be. I'm no longer innocent. I'm very similar to the girl in the book, but I don't have her innocence. And so I found that more charming than what I'm like now.
But I genuinely think I think from the perspective of being a musician, I've always found that kind of stage of other bands to be really fascinating. And I don't know why it is, but it just always has been. It's like the only U2 biography that I think's interesting is called, I think, Stories for Boys or Another Time, Another Place or something like that. And it's about their first few years just up to getting signed. And that to me that's the interesting stuff, and.
Well, a lot of bands don't stay real people, they get goofy and fool themselves or rich, and nobody wants rich people writing their soundtrack, or they just buy into their own hype, and that's just embarrassing. But for bands like us, underground and indie bands, you stay real people with real lives. Stuff happens. Nobody ever took care of us. We never got rich. We never got soft. We always had real lives. So there's plenty to write about. But my problem right now is that some of it is so dark, I wouldn't want to inflict it on the reader.
I see. Well, you've now kind of piqued my interest as to what the dark stuff is. So maybe you should write it. But then I can't tell people what to do, so I won't. No. Decide what to do. And then I'm saying, oh no, I'm doing it again, aren't I? I'm telling you. Forget I said any of that last part.
Okay. I didn't understand it, so.
Oh, that's probably okay then. Yeah, because I do tend to talk quite fast sometimes when I'm talking myself into a corner. And I'm quite good at talking myself into a corner, as you've probably noticed. So, you'd think after 20-something episodes, I'd be less talking myself into corners, but I think I'm just getting worse at it, to be honest. So, it's fine. You did one thing I will talk about though very quickly is you obviously with Red Heaven you recorded a song with Bob Mould. And I was talking to 16 Deluxe from Austin, Texas a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying about how they used to kind of hang out with Bob Mould. Which led to me doing a really terrible impression of Bob Mould from when I saw him playing with Sugar in Birmingham years ago. Just out of my own interest, how did that come about?
I think we played with Sugar in the other Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, I'll ask you what I asked 16 Deluxe. When I saw Sugar in Birmingham in the UK, it was the loudest gig I'd ever been to in my life, and I think it's still the loudest thing I've ever heard. and it was weirdly kind of bludgeoning the whole way through. And it's something that maybe I think I would enjoy more now. But when he played in Birmingham, UK, they came on and they did the first few songs of Copper Blue kind of back to back, which I think is kind of a nice thing to do occasionally. And he sang the first line of The Act We Act, and then bellowed the next line on a monotone, and then just bellowed the whole set like that. And I don't know, was that something that was happening? Because 16 Deluxe couldn't really remember if that's something that Sugar were doing all the time at the time.
I can't remember.
No, we toured with them, and I don't remember a single show.
The loud part I remember, but I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know.
The loud...
Bob's just a friend. I don't know. He was like uncle to my kids, and all of our friends are musicians. You can't really help but know everybody in the business, and you can't really know anybody else because your life is so insular.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I remember Sugar, just the loudness. I remember being a kind of very trebly loudness. Whereas I remember seeing you guys in Wolverhampton on the Red Heaven tour, and I remember it being a kind of more mid-rangey thing, and it being, I remember that being really good.
But that's, I mean, venue to venue, I would imagine that's, because it depended on where we played, every room would have kind of a different, would skew the sound a different way.
Yeah, you see, my abiding memory of that particular gig is just before the end. I think it was during the encore or right at the end of the set. My friend Andy, who I'd gone to the gig with, shouted out, "Delicate Cutters," really loud, just as Kristin started to play it. And I could have thought, oh, that's kind of awful that he's done that, because it's a complete random chance that would happen. But a part of me kind of died a little bit.
I remember that. I was fucking pissed.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, man. You looked angry, Dave, from what I remember.
Don't I get points for taking a request? Or being psychic or something?
Exactly. You get double points for having, exactly as you say, psychically having read what Andy was about to shout, starting the song, and him shouting it just... It was literally within fractions of a second. It had barely left his mouth when you'd started playing it.
Yeah, and Andy are...
We did a tour where we took requests, remember?
Oh, yeah.
You guys had to sit down.
Yeah. We did a tour where we played for like 2 or 3 hours and took only requests. It was cool.
Did anybody shout out for Freebird?
Every single show.
Yeah.
It's a joke that never gets old, isn't it?
Oh, no, it was old before they tried it the first time.
I think it was like Connor Oberst or somebody, and somebody yelled that out at a show, and he just attacked the guy. It was kind of ridiculous, but it was just, he just went off on the guy. Wherever the guy in the audience was, he must have just been like, it seemed a little pretentious on his part, but still, it was kind of funny too.
You know what I think bands should do is I think all bands should learn it just on the off chance, and then occasionally just drop it in.
Yeah, it's not like anybody really wants to hear it. Yeah, that would be the ideal punishment.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody goes Freebird, you go, okay, count us in. And
now we all have to listen to Freebird because of Andy.
Because Andy asked for it.
Yeah. And next he's going to shout Delicate Cutters just as the song starts. And Alex will die inside and Dave will get enraged. So, which is the way it should be. Right, okay, we should probably draw things to a close, but if people are wanting to find your work online, what's the best place for them to point their little arrows on the screen to?
That's a question we should totally know the answer to. But I know, like, as far as Purgatory Paradise, the book is concerned, I know that Amazon's got it.
Yeah.
And if you go to, I think if you go to KristinHersh.com, there must be, right? Some link to getting it?
Oh, I'm sure. It sounds like something we would do.
Yeah.
Um,
and our stuff's on Spotify and crap.
Yeah. and isn't that just really profitable, Spotify? It's amazing the amount of money. I had a statement from Spotify this year. I think it was 6 cents I'd made.
That's what MTV used to pay us. I always get checks for 15 cents from MTV.
Amazing. Apparently, throwingmuses.com also has a big thing about the new release. So.
Yes. Which is it's the same URL. It just, if you put in throwing music, It's actually throwingmusic.com.
Ah, yes.
And if you use that URL, they're interchangeable. It's KristinHersh.com and throwingmusic.com are the same thing. I don't know if there is a throwingmuses.com.
Yeah.
It's coming up as one. I typed it in just on the off chance, and it does show the.
Well, we can sue them.
Album. Yeah.
Hey, look.
Yeah. This is real time checking for the listeners.
We're going to see
Checking.
if we have a website. We're checking to see. Oh, okay.
Oh, pretty.
This is the thing
That's
that
just the record.
Jesse did. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's right. This is about, and it says, there's all kinds of things there's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, IndieBound, limited signed
Definitely
edition.
recommend going to our website.
Throwingmuses.com, definitely.
It's a cornucopia of stuff.
It's the cover of the book, too, which is cool.
Yeah. And you can listen to a single track there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's people have got short attention spans these days, and that kind of website maybe is the way to go. Is a single info drop into their faces through their screens. The days of having the about the band pages and all that kind of stuff long gone. People are just wanting to.
Yeah, it is throwingmuses.com, which obviously, as you realize, we weren't aware of, but.
There you go. Right, on that
we wanted to do something, a site that was dedicated to Purgatory Paradise rather than, and it's not really a site, it's a landing page, but rather than have it just be incorporated into, the Kristin site's got the forum and the discographies and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted just something that was just dedicated to this.
Fantastic. That's nice to hear. Right, so it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I won't keep you because obviously people have lives that they need to go and live. Is there anything you'd like to say before we draw this chat-a-thon to a close?
Library.
Strawberry. And strawberry.
Strawberry. Oh, yeah. You guys are saving all kinds of time.
Yeah.
Aluminium or no.
Well, yeah. I'm married to an American, so I might start going with the aluminum thing just to keep her happy.
At one point, and you also called the book Rat Girl.
Yeah.
Which isn't what they called it in your neighborhood.
No, you see, that's how I kind of discovered it was as Rat Girl. I know it was called Paradoxical Undressing, wasn't it?
Yep. That was the original title, and they decided that Americans couldn't handle that many syllables.
Well, a friend of mine ended up buying it twice as a result of that.
Awesome. I'm a marketing genius.
Yeah. So there you go, Hamish. That's why you've bought it twice. So Hamish will be pleased to have been mentioned. So, Hamish bought 2 copies. Hamish. Hamish is a Scottish fellow. Oh, which leads me probably very neatly to my last question. A chap called Paul wants to know, when are you next playing in Glasgow?
I wish it was tonight. Our bass player cut off his thumb, but they sewed it back on, and now he's learning to use it again. And we've got everything happening. We're looking to do stuff at the beginning or like February, March time of next year is when we're hoping to do stuff.
That's kind of a holy fuck thing to just drop there. He cut off his thumb?
Yeah. Yeah, he was with a circular sander. I don't know what that is, and I don't even know what it means to cut it off your thumb. But I know they sewed it back on, and he is in physical therapy for his thumb. But we're supposed to play a show in London in November, but at that point he couldn't really feel.
So we're looking at 2014, and we always play Glasgow.
Excellent.
Love Glasgow.
Yeah.
I'll tell Paul to look out for that when your bass player's thumb is recovered. Well, I mean, I've got lost for words that there's been a thumb-related injury. Well, thank you ever so much for giving up some of your time.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Alex.
Likewise, it's very nice to speak to people who I've kind of thought were ace for a really long time. So
I hope we're still ace.
You still are, yeah, absolutely. This is it. I've not yet spoken to anybody who hasn't been nice. And I'm kind of dreading the interview where it'll be somebody who I really respect and they'll turn out to be a complete arse. And it's just, it's not happened yet. So,
I don't think I'm very nice.
Oh, you've been very nice.
Yeah, okay.
Now you've insulted her. You called her nice.
Oh no. And on that bombshell, I've ruined things. Uh-oh.
Ass.
Yeah, complete arse. There you go. So take away from this,
It doesn't
arse.
even sound like an ass when he says it.
Yeah, well, an arse and an ass are different things.
Fancy when you guys say it.
Yeah, but it's different spelling though. You know, it's A-R-S-E. So, you know, we spell it with extra letters. So, yeah, so.
You guys do spell it differently though, don't you? Arse.
Yeah,
right?
arse, yeah. Yeah, because arse and an ass are different things. It sounds, for a British person to say ass, it sounds really silly.
It's a donkey.
Yeah. If you say, oh, he's an asshole, people go, oh, what are you? Thinking you're American? But here you go, oh, what an arsehole. And then you have to take off the H as well because it then becomes arsehole.
I'm totally lost. Do you say chrysanth or mum?
Chrysanthemum is how I'd say it.
Yeah, I figured. See, you just wasted all of those raspberry blueberry minutes you were saving. I mean, milliseconds.
All those libraries over the years, it's all wasted. And on that bombshell, we'll draw things to a close. Kristin, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Everybody should go out and listen to your records. And all that's left to say now is a future library goodbye. Bye-bye. I like the way you did that. The silence there was superb. Future Library is brought to you by petpiranha.com, where you can go and find out various things about people who we talk about and various people who haven't been on the podcast yet, but might be in the future. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's twitter.com/futurelibrary1, so that's Future Library with a number 1. And you can email me at alexbottom@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe via iTunes. Just search for Future Library there. That's it. Thanks.